thank you so much for being here. We are so excited to have you, and I'm going to be handing it over to our incredible speaker, Mechie, here in 1 minute as I make her our host. But I just wanted to say that Tech Hive is incredibly honored to have you here. Check out techhive.club and we can explain to you who we are. We have a page built that I'll show you at the end for you to access the recording and all the additional information and materials, as well as a promo code if you want to check out some of our more exclusive content behind our login wall. And we're really excited to announce that we actually just recently got a grant from the Field Foundation. The Field Foundation's goal is to empower nonprofits working in leadership as well as other areas. And so it started by Marshall Fields, and we're incredibly honored. That's going to allow us to really build out our digital experience for our members to track and get even deeper into that content, and also make sure that our members are getting promoted, raises, and actually making the difference that they want to make. So with that, thank you so much again for being here. I am going to hand it over to our amazing presenter, and we are excited to have you all with us today. If you have any questions, put them in the chat box. We'll be monitoring that. And with that, Mechie, the stage is yours.
All right, thank you so very much. Let's see if I'm not gonna mess up the screen share. Please let me know when you can see. I cannot share yet.
Try now.
All right. All right. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, ma'am.
And hopefully not my notes. All right. Welcome, everybody. And I really am happy to be here to talk to you about data literacy as a career booster. The way I like to run a workshop is really to engage with you and make it valuable for your time. So I'm hoping that this is going to be very, very engaging and interactable. So please feel free to stop, ask a question, pop something up in the chat, and we'll talk as well. It's more important that you get value out of the session than rather me finishing through my slides. And I'm here for any questions. All right. With that, let's get started. So we're here to talk about data literacy as a career booster. So every business really in this day, right? It's a technology business, right? Therefore, there are no more, it can be critical enough to state that your data literacy skills are highly needed, regardless of your role, your title, your experience. This is something that is very fundamentally tied into any work experience, as really we're moving to all completely digital businesses and organizations. All right, next slide. So we're going to start with an introduction. In this introduction, we're going to talk about what really is data literacy, what we foresee, and what the other analysts foresee the impacts of data literacy in the years to come. And we're going to hopefully take some time to get a gauge of our data literacy assessment, individual assessment, to see where we sort of rank, right? And hopefully improve on it as time goes by. All right. So what are these predictions? So, for example, Gartner says that by 2022, that's as early as next year, 90% of corporate strategists will explicitly mention information as a critical enterprise asset and analytics as an essential competency, right? Now, what does this mean? If by next year, 90% of all corporate strategists include this, that means it's important to your organization. And I bet if it's important to your organization, it should be important to everyone that works within that organization, which means you, right? We also have a prediction by an analyst that says that by 2023, data literacy will become an explicit and necessary driver of business value. This will be demonstrated by formal inclusion in over 80% of all DNA strategies and change management programs. Wow, 80%, right? So that means in all, so this is not in terms of how important data is, but this is more in terms of how data literally specifically will be utilized within the organization. right? So these are really, really encouraging numbers here in terms of the prevalence of data literacy, in terms of how it's going to affect our work lives. Um, there is this soft anecdotal saying that really the way companies are valued is going to change. 5 years from now, one critical missing element is going to be how much data asset a company has, right? If you look at all the billion-dollar, the largest global capitalization organizations, they have huge amounts of data. We're talking about Facebook, we're talking about Google, we're talking about Netflix, right? What puts them out there in the crowd is the amount of information that they have. That data asset is non-tangible data asset, but it's quite it's important in the way they do business and how they're successful in terms of the business that they perform. So as we walk through this course, we want to keep the importance of data. I think has been something that's been said over and over again, but it's not just said it's not said without substance, right? There is substance to it. There is actual evidence that backs up that fact. Now, what really is data literacy, right? So data literacy, you can define it as the ability to read, write, and communicate data within context, right? This really means that it includes an understanding of the data sources, the constructs, the analytical methods, and the techniques that are applied. And you have the ability to describe the use case application and, of course, the resulting value. And when you're thinking about data literacy, there's sort of the way I like to think about it in sort of a quadrant. You need to be able to read it, right? You need to be able to work with it, analyze it, and argue with it. And we can really, we will delve deeper as we go through this workshop in terms of how these different four quadrants or components break down, right? So read, work, analyze, and argue with it. The way I would sort of frame it is I would equate the read to sort of understand, to ask the right question, work with, sort of find the right metrics to be able to support that question that you're asking, analyze, use the data and the metrics that you found to sort of find the answer to the questions that you ask of and read, and argue it, which really pertains to tell the story, right? So you start with a story that ties up uh, the data, the right metrics that you found, the right analysis, and tied up with a question. So it's a full cycle, and that's sort of why I have a circle over there in that presentation. So I'm hoping that this brings a little bit more clarity on really what data literacy is. As we walk through, I have several slides more that I will give you very simple examples of use cases that we deal with in everyday life. But any questions so far? If not, I can move on. All right, as we jump into this very first wrapping up of the introduction of the workshop, how about we sort of get a level set and take a minute or so to sort of get an assessment of where we are. So this is an abbreviated sort of assessment. So if you don't mind just filling this out and to get sort of assessment of where you are in terms of your data literacy competency.
Great, and you should all see the poll. So go ahead and take some seconds and fill this out. Don't overthink it. Mechie, you can see the poll as well, correct?
Right.
Great.
Yes.
And then once you're done, take a minute. You can see here that we've added point scores. So as you're filling this out, make a note of where you fall. And hopefully we see that by the end of this, we've helped move the needle for you all. And if you're on mobile, you should be able to see it as well. So we're still waiting for a few folks to finish it up. So we'll just give it a few more minutes here. Good, we're about halfway there. No rush. We want to make sure you feel comfortable with your results, although, you know, this isn't a test, even though you're technically scoring yourself. No pressure. Mechie, we'll give it another 30 seconds or so. I have a timer here, so I'll let you know when we're at close to 100%.
Fantastic.
Great, so I'm gonna go ahead, if anyone, give it 10 more seconds. If anyone wants to hit submit to get their results in, I wanna hit end, but I don't wanna cut you off if you're one question short. So I am stalling 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We're gonna go ahead and end the poll. Oh, nice, thank you, whoever did that, got it. Here we go, now you can see the results. So Mechie, I'm gonna go on mute and I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you. All right. You guys there are lots of people that score really, really highly. I'm very, very excited to hear that. This is very good. So most people on the meet, some neutrals, some more practitioners, and some experts. So that's very good. I'm very happy to see that. So hopefully I can only enhance or maybe inspire you to think about the way you use data literacy in much more insightful ways that you haven't considered before. All right, so moving on. Next slide. Don't worry about taking a screenshot of the link. Kim is going to have all of that on the website that you can have access to at the end. So don't worry about taking screenshots. You can have it. And the video is also going to be hosted on the website for you to access at leisure. So now we're going to move on to impact and awareness. So in this section, we're going to talk about data literacy in our everyday lives, workplace, and communities. I hazard that we all, every single one of us, uses data literacy in very complex even ways that we just don't think about it because it's just part and parcel of our everyday life. So we're going to talk a bit about that so that you get much more comfortable. For those that are not comfortable with the idea of data and data literacy, you're already doing it. You're just not aware that you're doing it. And we're going to talk about what the data literacy competency levels are, the way we at Data Products sort of map those out. And of course, we're going to tie it to your career because that's the whole point of this workshop, right? How it impacts your career. So let's get started on that. So how does data literacy feature in our lives, workplace, and communities? And this is blank. All right. So let's see here. These are some examples of real world uses of data in our everyday lives, right? So data isn't something to be fearful of. And let's face it, we've been using it to enhance our decision making in our personal lives for years, right? So data really is not scary. The idea that colloquially we associate data with statistics and mathematics and AI and machine learning, it's something that executives speak a lot, but that doesn't mean that we in our everyday lives don't use it. We use it in very many different ways, right? So for example, if you go to Amazon, you're purchasing that thing and they go, oh, people like you, buy that. That was all data, right? You're using data to sort of make a decision to sort of look and explore this new product or this new service that's been offered to you, right? Mortgage financing, we've all been there, or most of us have been there, where you're looking at rates, interest rates, what are the points, what are the terms, what are the down payments, you're comparing it and based on your credit score to make the decision about which lender to go with and what loan to take, right? That's making decision out of data. Perhaps you're evaluating which colleges to go to, right? So you're saying what programs do they offer, what great professors, how do professors rank, what is the tuition and cost going to be like for you? Do you have any scholarship? What's your probability of finishing? Do you have to commute? You're using data, which is all of these factors, right, to make this decision about which college to attend. What about personal fitness? We all have the smartwatches and smartphones, right? How many steps have you put in? What's your heart rate, right? You exercise 3 times a day. You did better today than yesterday. How many cups of water did you drink? You're using data to hold yourself to a standard, right? To drive towards a goal. Again, data-driven data literacy. So there's so many ways that we use data in our everyday lives. So if people were still struggling and then uh, examples like this really help you sort of distill how often you use data. You go to the supermarket, you're looking at prices, you're looking at labels, right? What is there sugar in one? Is there too much salt content? That's data that you're using to sort of evaluate and make a decision. And there are 18 sort of simple examples I have listed out here on this dashboard, on this power presentation. How many, just quickly, informally, just enter in the chat, how many of these do you use regularly in your life? I know I've used all 18. So just quickly take a glance. There are about 18 of them, I think.
Yep, Christy, pretty much all of them. Mariella, 17.
Yeah.
I'm getting a couple private DMs on the chat. All of them. Yeah. This
So
is great.
yeah, everyone uses it. We just don't think about how we use it because it's so engraved in our lives. Now, what are the different competency levels when we're talking about data literacy? The way us at Data Products like to break it down, we break it out like we do in college with the coursework, right? The 101, which is like the introductory, 201, 301, and 401 level courses. In this case, competency levels. For the 101, we associate that with an awareness sort of label to it. The 200 levels, the learner, the practitioner for the 300, and the advanced or expert for the 400. Now, what is associated with the 100, for example? This is some sort of a meaningful level of understanding. You understand and you're aware that data is something that you use every day. I would say at this point, everyone at least is at a 101, right? You can at least name 5 ways in which you use data on your everyday basis. So you are, everyone in this course right now listening to this at minimum is at a 101. One thing to keep in mind is some roles, right? Again, keeping in mind that we're talking about this in relation to your career or to your job. Some roles are going to require 101 literacy, whereas others are going to require all the way to 401 level sort of competency levels. So wherever we are, regardless of the role, this is a good start. It's some sort of awareness in terms of this is our assessment where we are. These are things that we're aware of, we know, and these are things that we don't know, or some of the things. So we're starting to explore that. And this is just going to empower you in order to figure out how you can drive further and become much more competent as you need to sort of boost your career. Now, how does this tie to career? We've talked about data literacy and the way we use it. Now, everyone here is probably familiar with people, processes, and technology concept. Every organization, this has been going on for the last 44 decades, excuse me, where organization really is defined by the people, processes, and technology, right? That's the way it's been. That's the way most people understand it. There's been a huge shift from it, right? With the advent of prevalent use of data, now the further framework has changed to a people, processes, and technology underscored by data support. So we see data supporting people, we have data supporting technology, and we have data supporting processes. So there's this introduction of the importance of data that really underscores these three components of an organization. And because data has become such a key component in this, it's definitely going to be important to us, the people which are the part of that organization, right? So the humans in that triangle. So because it's important to them, it's important to us, and therefore important to our roles. So this is why it's important to think of data literacy beyond everyday use the way we currently aware of right now in terms of how it actually factors into our jobs and our roles. Now we're going to move into a more hardcore section of the workshop. When I mean hardcore, I'm just talking about, we're going to talk more about core things that are hard of data literacy. We're going to talk more about the career impact. We're going to talk about what a data narrative is, what your data narrative is, what it means to ask the right questions, finding right data and metrics to sort of support the answers to that questions, and how do you tell a story to sort of support all of that. Okay, so we talked about data being the sort of new triangle that supports the people, processes, and technology, which is a framework that defines an organization. How does this drill down to your career, you individually, right? So we all know that boosting career is tied to how you drive value for your organization. The value can range from revenue, cost savings, or helping with driving organizational goals, mandates, and vision, right? If your organization has a data literacy mandate, you can be a driver in that way. Even if it doesn't have a data literacy mandate, you can still boost your career by driving value in terms of performing your job requirements in a data-driven manner. So we're going to go through a couple of examples here and help you sort of think through the ways that you can do this. So working hard to establish the right vision and buy-in. I guess this is more for high-level leaders, right? You're creating that vision in terms of what you want for your team and your department. You want to empower your peers or your team to sort of utilize more data in terms of how to make arguments or decisions. You want to establish the right culture mindset. It's okay to ask why, so long as it's defended with some sort of data, as opposed to because that's the way we've always done it, right? Or that's what my belly, my guts is telling me. You see that executives and leaders establish a vision for the organization, and the people leaders establish a vision for their teams, all in the data. So we have a snapshot, a small chart here that I got from IBM. This is about telling you the sort of ways you can break down the value that is added. Typically, leaders who see the value added in terms of data in one of three ways. There are multiple, but there's usually the top three. A data integrator, if you're someone that's bringing multiple sources of data to sort of enrich the vision of what one sees around a question or a problem. You have the business optimizer, where it's about optimizing operations and automating things. And you have the market innovator, whether it's in terms of finding new value driven by the data that you've seen, or some decisions that you're making that are improving revenue, right? And this has impact on the market, on the data. This has impact in terms of data management, organizational efficiency, business outcomes, organizational agility, profitability, and revenues, right? All great things that are important to an organization. So for us to sort of boost a career, we need to add value. And if you can show, not just boost value and high, but show and tell a story of how you're boosting, how you're adding value to your organization, then of course you should be able to ask for whether it's that next raise, that next promotion, or whatever you want in terms of moving onwards, upwards with your career. So your data narrative, what I have here are a couple of examples of a role and some scenarios. And what I would like for us to do here is talk through how, given a role and a scenario, how one can potentially use data to sort of drive value for the organization in those roles and those scenarios, right? So let's take, for example, we have an analyst. An analyst, say your scenario is every day you go up to work and spend 5 hours doing Excel reports and sending it to some executives or business leaders. You have no idea if anyone really reads it, right? You're on Excel for 5 hours, maybe go into the database to pull up some data and then push it to Excel, and then you're making sure that the formulas in each cell are correct. It's a dreary, dreary, dreary amount of work. It pays, but it's a dreary amount of work. I imagine that you'd be more excited by using a bit more of your creative, right? If you could automate that sort of work and focus on asking critical questions or things that excite you to sort of wonder, all in favor of actually improving the work. But these are things that you can do that will drive your imagination. It'll make your work experience a lot more fulfilling, right? So that will be one way that you can think in terms of data literacy, in terms of automating that work. And that's a workshop for a different time in terms of automating that sort of reporting, but that's not very difficult to do. And that has huge value. Again, so if we think of a scenario where analyst Joe has been doing this for 3 years, and analyst Joe is tired of doing this and wants to become more of a project and manager or leader and decides that he's going to automate this. So he writes a 2-line script that pulls the data, puts into some Excel, and then sends out the email. Simple. Now that frees him up. What was taking him 5 hours to do, he can probably do in about 30 minutes or 15 every day. What does he do with the rest of his time? Now he can go up to his manager and ask for projects. And like, I'm looking for more hands-on project that I can lead or manage, or perhaps start doing some other personal project all related to the work and show the value. And like, this is what I'm doing. I'm investigating why this is happening, right? This is something I noticed. I can investigate to sort of drill down to the answers and then present the work to his manager, his leaders to sort of show, hey, I am more than this report machine. Let's talk about the second example here where we have a project manager. So if you're a project manager, uh, you're answering basically, you're in the middle of the pack, right? So you have a project with a team that you're probably responsible for. And you have to ensure that what's important to you is that your team is motivated, is functional and productive. That's the first thing. You also want to be able to communicate on the other side with your VP or your client about the project progress. And I imagine that this probably works like this. So project manager Anna every day has stand up. She comes into work, has 15 minutes, 30 minutes stand up with her team. They're going to talk about where they are, what they're going to be working on for the rest of the day, any hiccups, and any change to the Gantt chart, which is really the universal godlike metrics for any project management, right? Where we are, where we're going to finish each task. And then maybe on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, you take those communications and share with your client or your leader, wherever you're answering to. And usually there are questions that are posed from both ends, right? Usually from the client's end. But why is it this way? And why is that way? Some of the times you can answer those questions. All the times it catches you unawares and you have to go back and ask your team and sort of figure things and then respond. Now, imagine if project manager Anna were to say, now, I know better than this. I can improve my process, making my life easier, making my team lives easier, and making my clients more, impress my clients better, right? That's a win for everybody. So what does she do? She decides that she's going to actually build a solution. Now, the way she builds a solution is she has a Gantt chart, but she has drill down capabilities for it. So so think about a supercharged Gantt chart that can drill down to support projections or changes within the project. So if anything happens, there is something that you can drill down to and support the data, right? You can predict when there's something going to go wrong and it automatically make that adjustment, right? Likewise, it also highlights insights like because of this, we can deduce that this is what's going to happen. I have done this enough number of times in this case is to see that this happens. Now, I am aware that these examples I am giving are more technical, right? But it doesn't have to be. It could simply be you thinking, looking through this, asking questions to your team and get the response and preparing a report so that when you're doing a presentation with your clients, you're answering the questions before they even ask it, right? It could simply be a simple PowerPoint presentation. And that's still value because I, as a client, if my questions are answered and solutions provided to my questions or my problems before I even come up with them, I'm very impressed. So all of that I find great value in. Moving on, what about the executive? So if we're a leader, right? You're much more high level into what you think. You think about strategy, you think about vision. And you can explore, for example, the monetization opportunities that are not in play to support, to improve your revenue. For example, how can we use data to support what our customers need? Perhaps there's a need that you're not aware of, right? A segment of customers that you should cross-sell or upsell to that you're not currently looking. So these are the sort of questions you can ask and see if there are answers that you can come up with them to support that. Now, if I can ask anyone from the audience, could you give me an example of a job title scenario that we can walk through? Made up, real, it doesn't matter. We can walk through to a possible use of how you can leverage data to sort of drive value as in that role. Come on, anyone.
Put it in the chat, but you can also throw out your own. There we go. Mariella says customer service rep.
All right. And customers, oh, that's a great one. I've worked with so many of that. That's a great one. I'm just going to assume a scenario. You're a customer service rep, right? What this means is you spend time sort of placating customers for issues that they've come up with, right? There are ones that come up with regularly. What you find in that role is there are certain questions that customers ask all the time. And maybe it's not consistent over a year or for the life of how many years you've worked in that role. It could be for something that's just recurring over the week, right? And you've had to do this over and over and over again. Now, something that you can do to sort of show initiative and drive value is to say, this sort of questions, these are the top 10 questions we've been seeing this week amongst the customers that I've been calling in or I've been talking to. And what solutions have you used to sort of resolve the customer's issues? So if you can write that in a nice report and share it with your team and your manager. Now, a call that would have taken, say, 10, 15, 20 minutes, right, boils down to 5 because you have a solution ready. You can assure the customer if the solution is not available that it's something that you're actively working on, and it's a win for, it makes you look good. It makes your team more productive. It makes your manager look good and the customer much more happy with that. So it's a win for everybody. Yes? Okay, moving on. Let's talk a bit more about asking the right questions. This is a critical part to data literacy because it's about how you think. If you think well, then you ask the right questions. So let's talk about this. One answer, the simple answer I have, the way you ask a right question is to turn that business question into an analytical question. As simple as that, right? And if it's an analytical question, change that analytical question to a business question. The goal to ask the right question is to connect the business and the analytics. As simple as that and as difficult as that. Right? So when you understand the relevant data and metrics that will help you support the questions and answers. So for example, we have a sales associate, right? That is asking, how many leads did you call? Right? So they're basically gauging the work that a sales associate does by how many leads they call. A better question I pose to you will be, what is your funnel conversion rate? It doesn't really matter how many people I call. If I call 10,000 people a day, right, versus I make 20 sales a day. Now, there is this funny story. I think it's I'm not going to call the name, for this huge technology company back in Silicon Valley. And they had this thing in terms of evaluating their developers. And the powers that be higher ups came up with this model of they're going to gauge someone's efficiency by the number of lines of code that they wrote every day. Now, that's a horrible metric, right? There are great developers there that can write a code with 10 lines every day. And that 10 lines will not break. It will solve all the problems that needs to be solved, right? Whereas there are people that will just code 10,000 lines of code a day. that has issues upon issues upon issues. And this was used in their review, their end of year review, in terms of, oh, we see, or monthly review, like on one-on-ones, we see that you wrote only on average 20 lines of code a day. And then there's this funny joke about this really famous developer now that goes, yes, but did any of them break? And he goes, if you're going to judge me by that, you're going to judge me like I'm going to refuse to sort of write code for the sake of writing code. So this is all to say it is really very important, the sort of metrics that you use and the questions that you ask, right? They need to drive at the heart of the problem, but most importantly, they need to drive at what is important to you and the organization. So let's talk a bit more about defining the right data to sort of support the data collection. So understanding the relevant metrics, it's important. So another example that I would give to sort of walk through this is we're talking about, when you're talking about data, when we talk about data collection, so we have our questions, we understand that to ask the right questions, we have to connect the analytics to the business value. But in order to support the answers, we need to find the data to sort of, for the analytics part, right, for that question. So how do you collect the data? To collect the data, we want to find and source all relevant data. We want to remember to think about the question systematically and include any interrelated data that could be relevant, whether we end up using it or not, but we want to think in a very abstract manner and group everything together. This includes not only internal, but external data and information as well, right? So think outside of the box. So if you were to think, if you're a retail store customer, let's go with that because that's where we started with. Who should I advertise to, right? What are my customers like? Don't just use the data that you have in store. Don't just use the list of customers that have been coming in to say these are the people or segment of people that we should advertise to. Go outside of that, right? Outside of that would mean, in this example, what data do I not have that's available to me externally? What about census data? How can I categorize this neighborhood that I'm based in, right? What sort of people work there? What are their age, family status, educational status, right? Does this give me much enrichment in terms of defining who my ideal customer profile is and who I should send out my advertising and marketing to, right? That's external data that's freely available that you can certainly use to sort of drive and find answers to your solution. Beyond data collection, another important key one is about data governance and storage. It's important, very important, to understand the critical nature of source data that's available and trusted and in the right format. And when I say in the right format, I mean profile, tag, catalog, standardized, trigger for sensitivity. Critical blowing, what I've found with my clients is they've had some experience in the past where they've tried to introduce some sort of new data or solution to sort of optimize operations, and it did not work because it was giving them bad results. And not because the model itself was wrong, but because the data they got or the provenance of the data was not checked. And so it kept pushing out incorrect data, and whatever you feed in bad comes out bad, right? Bad data in, bad results out. And then there's this mistrust that grows within the organization of using solutions like that. If this is a solution that's been, people have been using their gut and their experience to sort of drive the decisions for years and decades, and you introduce a solution and the solution does not go well because of the sort of data that you fit in it, it's not going to do anything for your vision of actually moving the organization to a more data-driven one. Right? So the data governance is critically important. We want to ensure that there's one source of truth when it comes to your data. Likewise with measurement, right? With measurements. So analyzing to create a measurement framework to describe your data with KPIs. KPIs are key performance indicators. In terms of the measurement, another rock on the foot that we found with our clients is different departments having different definitions of the same sort of metric. So if you imagine you're healthcare and they're talking about patient wait times, right? How long a patient waits before they see a provider. Universally, one would think that there's only one definition to that sort of metric. But some department might be saying, oh no, maybe it's from when they enter the door to when someone actually takes them into the room to doctor actually sees them, provider sees them. Another department might say, oh no, it's from the time they come into the door to the time they're actually checked in by the receptionist. Another department might say it's from the time they're checked in, because it might come in and not actually come up for help, to the time a provider sees them. So there should be a unified and constant definition of that metric and KPI, regardless of where it sits within the organization. So if I'm talking about patient wait times, everyone in the room, in the organization is all in agreement and clear about what I mean by patient wait times. Next is analysis, right? And yes, if you're a data analyst, you're a data scientist, AI machine learning is great. This is your game, this is where you fall, right? So using exploratory analysis, for example, to find patterns and trends and relationships that may exist and not be obvious to start to drill down to the root cause, right? What's causing you to ask this question, what's supporting this question? That's all that is. It would be remiss of us to not talk about ethics. It is highly important. And when I talk about ethics, it includes privacy here, especially when it comes to data, right? So we're not going to spend too much time on it, but I think it's important to talk about the importance of ethics. So regardless of how you do your analysis and pull your data, you want to think about privacy. In terms of, would you mind, how would you feel if this is your data being used in such a way? Is it ethical? Do you think from your moral standing in using this data? You want to also challenge the data and look for information and other data to try to disprove it, right? You may have some sort of internal biases that you're not aware of. So going through that exercise of trying to disprove the solution you come up with, analysis you come up with the other data, it's a good sort of trick to sort of see and poke the bear. Now, it doesn't mean that it solves it in every given case, but it's a sort of a good routine to go about. You want to review with a cognitively diverse team. And I'll state that again, cognitively diverse team, if you have one, right? So not just team members that's made up of a bunch of analysts, all from the same Ivy League school that grew up in the same town or whatnot. Try to make your team as diverse. Even if you don't have a diverse team, try to see if you can send an email to a bunch of folks. Hey, I need you for 15 minutes to pick your brain on something. The goal of this 15 minutes is sort of poke holes at what I have come up with. It will provide so much insight you would not imagine. Now, if you happen to be alone, what can you do? Just try to be aware of your own biases, right? And play devil's advocate and try to reframe the question and try to see if you can push out what sort of biases you may unintentionally have included in terms of your analysis. Now, we've come to the sort of final and one of the key points of this, which is about telling your story. We've all heard the conventional wisdom that says that if you want to advance in your career, then you have to work hard. Except that's only partially true. If you want to move up in the ranks in any business, then you need to master a critical skill beyond work ethic, the ability to communicate more information more clearly and in a limited amount of time. In business, you have a few minutes to get your point across before a business executive stops paying attention to you. If you fail to get right to the point, you risk losing them. Yes, a presentation may last longer, but you don't have as much time to get and keep someone's attention. You need to tell stories in a way that models the way people process information, right? So some key tricks to sort of keep in mind are you want to review and orientate yourself to the information and data so far and apply your personal experiences to it as you tell the story. Create easy to understand visualizations so leaders can understand the results. You want to tell a story to help decision makers see the big picture and act or the results of that analysis. A couple of ways to do that in terms of telling your story beyond these tricks I've had. There are two rule of thumb ways in terms of telling story. The rule of three. I'm not sure if everyone here is familiar with it, but the rule of three is based on the principle that things come in threes. Things that come in threes are inherently more funny and more satisfying and more effective than any other numbers. I know we humans are weird. So I'll give you an example. When you were talking about speech, if you say something is dark, cold, and dingy, that's more engaging than if you're saying something is dark or just dark and dingy, right? The fact that you have that grouped in threes, those adjectives, the dark, cold, and dingy, makes it more imaginative and satisfying and more engaging than just one, two, or even four. So that's a quick trick to sort of keep in mind as you're telling the story with the answer and the questions. There's another method, which is the pyramid principle, that's used quite a bit in storytelling. Us consultants use it a lot, right? And the pyramid principle it's a four-part sort of structure that is based on telling a story around introduction. So what's the situation? The complication, which is the second part, a question, and then an answer, right? So you start with knowing your audience, and then you arrange the information in a way that your audience can rapidly process, right? Making it personal based off your own experiences. So for example, think about the story with the introduction. Good stories don't just jump information on the audiences. They begin by crisply describing a situation, creating the mental picture in the mind of the audience. And like any good story, you need to have a complication, right? That highlights some sort of conflict, the problem or the opportunity that affects that situation. And then a question is posed to highlight the decision at hand. And then a moment of truth for the individual or the company. The answer or recommendation is then provided as the resolution and hopefully happy ending to the story. So the pyramid principle really is about telling stories or communicating in that manner. Let's do an example here. So imagine that you have been hired at a shoe company, right? And you find a problem and you're trying to tell a story with a shoe sales company. Let's call it Hot Foot Shoes. I don't know what it is, it's Hot Foot Shoes. So we're Hot Foot Shoes, and I'm Debbie. Manager at Hot Foot Shoes. So I come in my presentation in front of executives and I go, for years, Hot Foot Shoes has shown a steady increase in yearly revenue and profitability, right? Now that statement shows the situation, right? It's clear this is what's been going on, this is the situation as is. And then I continue. This quarter, Hot Foot Shoes, the profitability unexpectedly was flatlined for the first time in the company's history, right? Now that's a complication. And then I'm imagining in everyone's mind, the question is why, what's going on, right? That's exactly the sort of reaction I'm driving for. So then I dive down to how can we improve profitability for Hot Foot Shoes so that we take it from this flat line and start increasing it as it normally was, or maybe even surpass what it was performing. And we use data and all the analytics that I mentioned before, but the way we present that information, we don't start with, we see that there's a 15% jump in Hot Foot. No, I state this in a story form, engaging, right, with what's one universal, and it's called pyramid form because you start with one universal concept at the very top, and then you point out different independent aspects or concepts that affect that answer or that question, and then the results are further and down, and we can say this is part of the results of that, this is part of the results of that, this is part of the result of that. Another good rule of thumb is when we have several options or several responses to this, we want to try to minimize it and keep it in threes. So for example, if we were going to, if we had possible answers that were 10 of them, choose the top 3 or top 5 at most, because people don't remember things. Again, so the whole point about this I'm trying to talk about is you can work hard, you can push your data literacy in terms of understanding data and analytic skills up there, but without being able to communicate, it really falls flat. All right. We were going to jump into a breakout session, but seeing how I am on time, perhaps we can revisit this and we'll skip over this instead. So let's move on. Let's talk about final thoughts and takeaways. Okay. So what I would like, if anything, to take away from this workshops are three things. Data literacy can improve it simply by asking the right question. And right questions, again, is about tying the business value to the analytics value or the metrics of data. You want to use the data and the relevant uniform metrics to sort of support the question and drive the answers to that question. Right? Again, keeping in mind how we collect data, the governance of it, analytic methods, and the ethics, right? That goes without saying. And the third and key point that I would like for you to take away is to use data story to communicate the findings and to answer the questions. If you master just these three things, and no matter what level in terms of your data literacy you're in, whether you're still a learner and just being aware of the way things are used, or you're just being aware, you're practice, or you have zero sort of awareness, this is going to push you far in terms of how you work in your career. Can we jump up a little bit? And actually, let's put this on pause, if that's all right. We can come back to it. So as a sort of a final rounding notion, don't become obsessed with data, right? There are people that measure everything. No, that's no way to live. We live in the real world. The fact that data actually improve our decision-making capabilities doesn't mean that we need to move completely to a world where we're trying to optimize everything, right? Like Einstein says, not everything that can be counted counts, and not everything that counts can be counted. So combining business impact metrics, training participation metrics, analytical tools adoption metrics will show data and analytic leaders that there's a positive or negative correlation between training provided and the analytic tools used. A strong correlation along with a strong ROI can help data analytics leaders make the case for continued investments in trainings. However, there are certain hiccups that could come along, right? Perhaps there is no data. Perhaps your company hasn't started data. There's still value in learning that you are not collecting any data, or maybe a particular data that you think is critical in terms of how you want to do the analysis. And then the action step will be now to begin collecting it. Perhaps it's just simply the right thing to do, just not all business decisions inherently improved by the use of data, right? Like we said, sometimes it's communicating, connecting with someone. That could be a more better business decision in terms of the way you act at that time. And we want to avoid to be too metrics driven. We don't wear organizations, a living, breathing thing, right? Anchored by people, and yes, supported by data with technology and processes, but it's made up of the people. And by that, it means we have human relationships that are not about counts and metrics and whatever else that's number driven or analytical driven. As a final thought, most organizations who focus on any work that's based on adoption rates and the number of people that are trained or in using the adoption or using a solution. But these do not really matter if there is no business impact, right? So we are thinking about business impact whenever we use data. So if we're going to grab some data and use it, or think in the data literacy way, what is the business impact? Always be thinking about the impact on the business. And there are only mostly three: make more money, save more money. Actually, two: make more money and save more money. Everything else will fall within under this two. If it's optimizing operations, it's saving money, right? If you're creating a new product, it's making more money. So saving money or making more money. And really that's, or driving vision, I should say. There's a vision and mission aspect to it within organization. So that should be a third. Yeah. Let me see. So instead of going to the breakout section, which I don't think we'll have much time for, given I ran over, how about we just talk, right? I'm here for the next 15, 30 minutes. Let's ask questions, let's scenarios, let's talk to me.
Great. And while we're waiting for those comments to come in, I'm going to launch the poll so we can see if there's movement on the other side of this. So we're going to have that poll up, but would love to hear you open up questions for Dr. Mechie. She is here for you and has some incredible background and experience. So would love to hear any questions from you all, but also take a second and redo that poll. We'd love to know if this has moved the needle for you. It's really fun. Again, we're in data, so really fun stats, and we'll definitely post this on afterwards. Also, while we're waiting for questions to come through, and we've gotten some great compliments coming through directly, as well as in the group chat, I am going to show you all where this lives so you can find it online. We will have it in the email follow-up as well, but you can find it. Now you're seeing my inbox, aren't you? Here we go. So you can see on our website here, if you go to past events and then you go to data literacy, we will have the video posted. We will have the resources, the follow-ups. Everything is hyperlinked here. Mechie has included a data dictionary, some great resources, and then we've also included a promo code. So if anyone is interested in joining Tech Hive and seeing the content on the back end, we've got more talks, more exclusive content, more mentorship. So feel free to join for a free month, but everything is located here. The video link will be posted right here in probably 15 minutes. So with that, I just wanted to show you where this lives, and you'll get this link as a follow-up as well. Again, I'm going to stop sharing. Love the results coming through. We've still got 9 participants on, so I'd love to see people kind of take some time and give us your feedback. Don't feel pressured if you still are feeling confused. If with all this information you feel more confused, you know, we might expect that as well. So Christy's got a question. Mechie, I'll let you hand it over to answer that.
All right, I see the question. Thank you, Christy, for the question. It's a really good question. So if everyone hasn't seen it, it's how do you educate your organization to be data-driven? And that's something I work with a lot of leaders, and I have a couple of leaders I'm working with right now and sort of coaching them on that. You want to tie it to something that matters, right? You want to get buy-in. And we all know there's a little bit of maneuvering when you go to get leaders to sort of engage and support. So I would start out with building the case for it personally. And the way you build a case for it is, I would, in your shoes, whatever, I'm not sure what your role is, Christy, but I would go to the other leaders, line of business leaders. There are things that are important to them, right? As they have their mandates. So tie those mandates to things that are data-driven. If I can say, like, what would you think if we implemented this? That's not going to cost you. It's maybe going to cost you 10 hours or so every week in terms of resource time. That can bring down your work by, save you in terms of hours by 20% for the quarter, right? So basically, we're making the value, again, it's all about the business value for those leaders. So in terms of starting to the whole organization, I would start with independent leaders or my own team to begin with. Start with my own team, try tight with the things that are important to me, the business value and the mandates that are important to me, my vision. Make sure once it's flowed through my entire team and we start thinking of that matter, then start to convince other people, like, look, I was able to implement this and drive sales if you're in a sales team, or marketing, improve this efficiency by 30%. Do you think you'd be interested in it? If you're not in that sort of position where you have your own team, then it's about talking one-on-one with the leaders, right? And the way to do it, again, is through data, right? So yes, you can say, I can do this for you, but they're always going to be very suspicious about what you can do. But if you can show them factually that, look, I see that last quarter you spent 100,000 hours in terms of customer service. And I say that if we do this small thing where every week or every day, we're just getting the top 20 or the top 10 customer service questions and automating the solutions for it, because this is things that we see, it will basically save 5 minutes per call, right? And that 300 or whatever hours that you spent in from last quarter, just by the small task that you're doing, will reduce that to 100. So from 300 to 100, that's threefold decrease in terms of your optimization. That's significant. And if you're reducing that, that means that the customer service, that the hours you're spending, maybe the amount of funds that you're spending on resources goes down. That means those resources can be assigned to other things, right? Improving your efficiency. That means your budget can flow more. You can do more fun things that you want with your budget. Trust me, someone that's a customer service manager will be very interested in that. Okay? It's about just showing them that it's just about showing them that upside. And this, you can get buy-in from one, get buy-in from another. And then one way to do it, which I found with CIOs that I coach, is once you talk to this line of business leaders, it may be too much to sort of drill down for each individual leader, but if you talk to all of them, you find a common denominator, right? If you do one small project, it will affect business leader A, B, C, D. And you start with the common denominator, so have the biggest impact. You can't do everything at once. So once you start small and it has the widest impact, it's a much more natural flow that each of these individual business leaders who want to say, what next can we do to improve it? I hope that helps. Kim, you're on mute.
Yes, Chrissy says thank you. That helps tremendously. Any other questions? Well, if you do have some, you can always email. You're going to have all the contact information. You can email TechHive and we'll pass those over to Mechie. You can email Mechie directly. We have all this posted online. Mechie, do you want to put your email in the chat box as well, or a good contact for you?
Sure.
And I think you put it on your presentation. That'll be in the recording.
Oh, there you go. There you go. Yeah. Perfect.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you all so much. We still got that poll open. We're getting great responses. So thank you so much again. We really, really appreciate it. If there's any other questions, we'll stay on for a few minutes. But otherwise, have a fabulous afternoon. Remember to check out the website to share with friends. This is a free and open experience that we're really excited that you have an opportunity to experience. So thank you so much again, and we will talk to you soon.
Absolutely.